No, no speakers.
No speakers is my understanding. Is that correct? All right. So we will go first to the minutes of the last meeting, which are in the book. Are there any corrections, changes, or the like? On the motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Contrary minded? In favor? Done. Approval of the work plan. Any changes?
No changes.
Any comments? Motion to approve, second? Done. Report on operations. Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, good afternoon and welcome to the March 2019 MTA Bridges and Tunnels Committee meeting. I wanted to point out some of the highlights which will be reported on this month. We continue to see traffic totals increasing at our facilities year over year. Collisions and collisions with injuries were down for the reported month of January when compared to last year. We continue to focus on employee safety in our cashless tolling environment, and our financial support to mass transit and toll revenue is above budget for January. With that, I'd like to have Chief Hildebrand report on operations.
Thank you, President DiCrescenzo. The report on operations begins on page 18. As President DiCrescenzo said, paid vehicle traffic on B&T facilities continues to increase significantly compared to the same period in 2018. Traffic was 5.4% higher in January of 2019, and preliminary traffic for February of 2019 was 3.5% higher. Bridges and Tunnels continues to use targeted enforcement efforts to help improve the safety of its facilities. Bridge and Tunnel officer issued 8.4% more speeding summonses in January of 2019 compared to the same period in 2018. This information is found on page 38 of the Bridges and Tunnels Committee report. Unless there are any questions, this concludes the report on operations.
I just have one question, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any data that shows the collections of fines in response to those summonses?
We keep data for our actual traffic court appearances. So when an officer goes to traffic court, he or she comes back with the information on what the individual was fined. That's kept in our electronic log database, so I could get some of that information.
Could we do that? I'd like to see whether or not if the courts are doing their job as well.
Yes, I definitely will.
David.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Do we get the fines or the state get the fine?
I believe it's the state that gets
Yes.
the fines. Yes.
Okay. If there is any legislation that we can propose that we should get any moving violations of the vehicle and traffic law, that the fine should go to the agency that issues the summons. Or if we have our own vehicle and traffic violations, if they write it on, and you have to look into it, this is going back a long time for myself, if we have rules and regulations or vehicle and traffic laws that pertain to the bridges and the tunnels, and they write on ours instead of on the New York State or New York City violations, I think we might have the possibility of getting those fines.
Just one brief question on page 38. The reduction in summonses on the unsafe lane changing and texting, is that a reflection of that behavior being curbed or just fewer summonses because there's less focus on that behavior?
I'll say a little bit behavior being curbed, and it's sort of a ripple effect over time. So you write more summonses, more enforcement, everyone knows you're enforcing, and the actual number of violations hopefully goes down. It's sort of utopian idealistic. The actual reason, or more of the contributing reason to that, is the fact that we don't have toll plazas anymore. So we don't have those unsafe lane changes on the toll plaza where we had 20 lanes to shift back and forth between. So that was one. And two, we don't have that natural sort of stopping point of the toll plazas. So it's a little bit more difficult to detect, someone on their cell phone when you have basically a line of officers across the roadway enforcing those type of violations and being on the lookout for that. That being said, we do keep an eye out when we are patrolling our roadways for unsafe vehicle movements. We do a lot of aggressive driving enforcement. That's really where we shifted the focus of our enforcement in the new cashless tolling world, is to get those people that are following too closely, which a person that's tailgating is basically a speeder that can't get to where they want to go or the speed they want to go to. And other aggressive driving violations, we still pay great attention to distracted driving because that is a contributing factor to a lot of unsafe conditions out on the roadways. But the reason is the shift to a cashless tolling environment as opposed to the toll plazas.
The safety report begins on page 33. The following are highlights of performance indicators for the month of January. Enforcement of safety regulations and other actions are resulting in some significant improvements in customer safety. For the 12 months through January 2019, there were 6.5 collisions per million vehicles, 16.4% better than the 7.8 rate in the previous 12 months, and 13.8 better than the 7.6 rate in the 12 months ending 2016. The January 2019 injury collision rate was 0.99 per million vehicles, slightly higher than the rate of 0.94 in the previous 12 months. This rate increase equates to approximately one additional injury collision a month for all B&T facilities. Employee and contractor safety metrics are as follows. The employee accident reports and lost time injury rates for the 12 months through January 2019 were both higher than the previous 12 months. And facility safety committee meetings, B&T is increasing awareness to address the increased injuries related to entering and exiting vehicles. The construction injury rates for 12 months through January 2019 were higher than the previous 12 months, but lower than the 12 months before that. And that ends the safety report.
Questions? Thank you. Financial report.
The financial report for January begins on page 39. Support to mass transit totaled $82.7 million in January, which was $13.3 million better than our adopted budget. Toll revenue was $151.3 million, which was $3.8 million above the budget. The additional revenue resulted predominantly from better than expected traffic volume. Total expenses were $36 million, which was $7.5 million below budget. Beginning with this month's report, cashless tolling information has been reorganized to reflect that it is now B&T's established toll collection method. Cashless tolling traffic data is now in the report on operations, and revenue collection rates are now in the financial report. Other data related to the Customer Service Center remains in the Cashless Tolling Customer Service Report, which begins on page 54. Unless there are any questions, this concludes my reports.
Questions? Thank you. Capital program.
The report on the capital program begins on page 56. In February, B&T awarded 5 commitments totaling $0.6 million compared to 2 planned commitments totaling $3.6 million. Year-to-date, 12 commitments were awarded for $2 million against a planned total of $3.6 million. There were 2 completions this month, which included the RFK Bridge approach ramp from the Bruckner Expressway for $25.4 million, and the post-cashless tolling work at the Marine Parkway Bridge for $2.9 million. Year-to-date, 3 projects totaling $51.2 million were completed, achieving 106% of the year-to-date goal of $48.3 million. There were no closeouts in February and 4 closeouts year-to-date totaling $3.1 million. Unless there are any questions, that completes the report.
Questions? Thank you.
Procurement started on page 64. There are no non-competitive procurements or ratifications. There is an award of a competitively solicited personal service contract for the biennial bridge inspections to 4 separate firms to keep our assets in a state of good repair. These contracts total $8.24 million. Unless there are any questions, this procurement is described in detail in the enclosed staff summary.
Questions? Motion. Second, discussion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Abstentions? Done. No, you've covered both, competitive also, right? You covered, right. Procurement contract report is in the book. Are there any questions concerning it?
It'll
Very
be
well.
discussed in detail in finance.
I'm sorry?
It'll be discussed in detail in finance. It's actually a finance item in the finance committee.
Understood. On the motion to adjourn, all those in favor? Contrary minded? Done.